Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review Curse from 2005. A film that I would go on and I would say would be a car crash that I werewolfed away from. Cursed is to be a film that I would say is to suffer from reshoots because we'd go on and have Michael Rosenbaum, who've been on his podcast Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, mentioning about how there were people that really didn't want to go on and really didn't want to be there on set. When you'd poke around and find out why, it's because of this movie had suffered through a massive amount of reshoots. Wes Craven involvement of this movie was to go on and say that he did it because he was getting paid well. But really, when he was to go on and do this project, it took so much time off of his life, and the end result was to be a movie that you eventually are to probably go on and know about, or to go on and probably still check out, regardless of how I'm to go on and talk about it. Cursed. We'd go on and we would see the Easter eggs of Universal monsters and other celebrity wax figures at some point in this movie. But really, if anything, that doesn't really add much to this film. This movie is to go on and just have bullet points of what I guess it's to try to accomplish. But if anything, there's so much about this film that just kind of doesn't have a good flow whatsoever of movie. We'd go on to have this movie that I think has characters suffer from more of the growing pains of being a werewolf, more so than transforming into one. By the third act, it seems that there is to seemingly try to say that there's going to be a whodunit kind of angle to this film. By the time that we are to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together to want to figure out who had done anything in this film, it doesn't really matter. We'd go on to have a film that I feel has the worst ever werewolf transformation that isn't even done in practical effects, it's done in CGI, so of course it's bad. There is a mixture of computer and an actual guy in suit being put into this film. And at some points of this movie, it does feel like a werewolf movie. Like, I'd have to go on and probably compare it to like the Wolfman 2010. But most of this movie doesn't feel at all like a werewolf movie. It's so weird. To me, I would almost go on and mistake it as a superhero movie more so than I would a werewolf film. If anything, I would also kind of try and confuse it to like the Teen Wolf MTV show. But even that, I am to go on and just be struggling to give this movie that high of a praise. If anything, the only thing that I could really compare this movie to is probably Ginger Snaps. Because, if anything, we have these two sibling sisters that go on, and one of them is becoming a werewolf and is to have the threat of the outside of their home having a werewolf outside of it, that they're just stuck in this home. And I'm like, really? This is the whole movie of these two girls just being stuck in this house? Okay. And my disappointment of that film is just because I had watched it so long ago in a galaxy far, far away. So, for whatever reason, if you're to go on and say that Ginger Snaps is your bomb daddy-o or whatever, it's the bee's knees or whatever, maybe I'll go on and I will check that movie out, but without a doubt. I don't feel that exactly. I will say that Curse is the worst werewolf movie I've ever seen, but probably top 5, right? At the end of the day, I would go on to say that I still want to go on and watch every werewolf movie that has ever existed to make that quite call of what is to be the worst werewolf movie. But if anything, I'll have a fun time just trying to find all these projects and eventually just having a bit of fun with them, if nothing else. But Curse, I will say, is a bad film. Just because it really is to go on and not have much of a story whatsoever. Like, it feels like not what you're supposed to come in for, which is a werewolf project. And really also, what is this movie to go on and be about? So the main focus thing of this movie, and probably the more reason why I say that this movie, is to kind of just um, be disjointed of every bit of scenes. Like we have Jesse Eisenberg's hair that is to change so frequently in this film, but also I just don't have an idea of how much time is really passing in this film. Um, Plus, also there's just kind of weird things that continue to just keep going on and be like, huh, like going on in this film. Like we have Becky that's in this amusement park and she just completely loses her friend in the beginning piece of this while she's going on and getting her fortune told. Uh, we'd also go on and have Jennifer, who is Becky's friend, who's with her at the amusement park, goes on to talk to Jake, her former lover. And neither one of them are to be aware that Becky is to be dead in this film, which is kind of to be bothersome to me. It's like, how is it that they don't know? Are they just writing her off as missing? Like, I'm so confused. But, anyways, so, like, did neither one of them get a phone call from her? Like, uh, uh um, I think, if anything, the more baffling thing is just the way that this movie just straight up ends. But, anyways, so, uh, we'd come to find that Becky goes into having a car accident, which also is to involve both Jimmy and Ellie, who is to have crashed into Becky. So, as Jimmy and Ellie are trying to save Becky from this car accident, there is to also be a werewolf attack that eventually leaves both Jimmy and Ellie with scratch marks on their arms and chest and what have you. So, the siblings go on to have theories forming. Jimmy is more speculative that it's a werewolf, as it looked like a big, huge, monsterish looking wolf. And Ellie's trying to be more rational, more reasonable, not believing that there could be a thing of werewolves. And we'd even go on to have Jimmy that is turning to guys like Jake and be like, well, yeah, I think I'm a werewolf. And Jake is like, oh, come on, Jimmy, like, come on. And we get the always cliche of people not really believing in werewolves and such and all these supernatural things. But also, it's fairly goofy when Jimmy is going on and being with Bo in the later part of the film, and there's the big reveal that Bo is to actually be secretly gay and is going to find Jimmy where he lives and confess to him that he is gay. And then Jimmy is going on in turn and saying, like, well, hey, yeah, like, well, I'm a werewolf. Like, I'm dealing with the same kind of thing. Like, really, okay. But anyways, so that was just like, man, that was a choice. Like Jimmy just goes out like, hooray, gay, whatever. Like, but I'm a werewolf. Like, oh. Anyways, so we would go on and come to find within this film that Jimmy goes on to find that his dog even becomes a werewolf because of blood spilled. And so Jimmy rushes off to find where Ellie is, which is this wax like museum party thing. And then here is where the big reveal of this werewolf is to have made its way into attacking and mauling all these people. And we have to figure out who is it within this werewolf person. And so we'd go on to, by the third act, come to find out that this werewolf is weirdly playing with its food instead of eating it. Because even when Ellie gets knocked out, the werewolf is trying to go on and kind of smack Ellie back awake to then go on and try and scare her more or hurt her more. And I'm like, that is an odd choice. Um, but then also we have the werewolf that is dealing with both siblings at the same time. That is just like, okay, like like this movie is to just be like, okay, whatever you want to do here, film. So by the end of the movie, we're to assume that all of these werewolves should be taken out in the very traditional way of silver bullet, right? But even that, it goes on to just be like, well, like let's try to figure out ways to get around that because not everybody's gonna have silver bullets. So let's go on and try to find silver stuff, or let's go on and figure out a way to just like, well, hey, let's take the head away from the rest of the body and just call it to be that's a way to take out the werewolf because again not everybody's just gonna be wielding around silver bullets like the Lone Ranger of so many other bejoking things that people would have to go on and reference in werewolf movies of the past. So Curse is a movie that ends up being bad, but sadly enough, I was to go on and tend to rewatch it and just hope that somehow people were going to go on and not only want to look into this thing, but also want to go on and hear the whole breakdown of this entire movie, scene for scene, blow for blow. Because, man, I just get into details about stuff of movies that people probably won't care about, but I'm having fun doing it anyways. Because this film, I feel, will go on throughout the breakdown of the movie, have some head scratching moments, and have me just kind of break down this film. Just like, why did this scene exist? And da 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 da. Like, what was the thing there? What was the thought there? But dare say, I think it's about that time to just go through a breakdown of this film. I did not go on and go out of my way to figure out where this was streaming because I go through a lot of bootlegged apps anyways. If for whatever reason it's not a convenient streaming service for you to be able to go to see currently at the second recording, I will go on and I'll say you could go out of your way to find apps like Zelifonic, Zelivonic, or you can go on and find Clede Plus, KLEDE Plus, on a Google Play Store. If you are a mobile device user, you should be able to go on and watch this movie for absolutely free. If for whatever reason those aren't available, if those don't work for you, I will probably be able to go on and find a alternative movie app for you to dare in fact be able to watch this movie for absolutely free. Again, if you're a mobile user, if you have a tablet or iPad or a phone or whatever, you should be able to watch this movie hopefully for absolutely free. Because I'm sure there's probably a fee or something of goofy weirdness you'd probably have to go on and watch this for. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to go on and get into full on breakdown and spoilers of this film. Because at the end of the day, I think it's about that time to say it is. Spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time to get spoiled. This movie. Let me know in the comments below what has been your worst werewolf movie you've ever seen, or just a werewolf movie that you are to maybe enjoy. Because maybe I'll go out of my way to watch that because I love werewolf movies. Believe me, this is a guy of the face that loves werewolf films. Let me know also in the comments below what is your favorite supernatural show or movie or whatever, because eventually at some day I will go on and probably review those also. If you like Blackula, Dracula, or any kind of other Acula, maybe Scott Bakula, let me know in the comments below, because eventually I may go on and check out all those projects. If you just like Scott Bakula, check out Quantum Leap. I did the original Quantum Leap show at some point. I think that's the only thing that I have Scott Bakula in currently at the second recording that I reviewed. I know he's in Star Trek. Anyways, so yeah, let me know in the comments below what's be your favorite supernatural movie or just horror film, and eventually I might check it out. Because without a doubt, there's a lot of movies that had come out recently that I probably should have checked out, like Backrooms or it seems soon that Evil Dead Burn will be out, so maybe I should probably check those out. I don't know. I had gone on to recently check out Obsession, which was recently reviewed, and you can get my review of that. there's probably a number of other things that I'm kind of itching to probably cover in this channel that I'm kind of second guessing or questioning whether or not I should do them. Because feasibly, I just am desperately trying to figure out projects that will go on and do well in the view department because of how uh, things are kind of technically struggling right now. Uh, but if anything, that's just because of the weird, wacky choices that I make every time I go into this thing. Just the weird nonsense of what I do on the day to day. But if anything, I hope to go on and find something that at least will be written off to me to be fun. Um, I have kind of an itch to possibly, after this project is over, to try to finally uh, get some time to watch Project Hail Mary and then review it in a very casual way. But if anything, I hope to try to get that accomplished because I said that I'd done that already. But if anything, we'll see if it gets done. There's so many projects that I really want to go on. I don't want to say that I'm going to do, and then I end up getting so distracted. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this instead. Um, like there's so many sequels of so many things that I really wanted to go on and I really wanted to cover, but they just fell to the wayside. And I'm thinking like, oh no, this seems like the better project to do, and then like it does worse. Um, so I don't know. Like it's me experimenting, hoping for the best, and hope that you will go on and enjoy any of these things. Or if you don't, then let me know other things that you were to go on and like. To all go on, and I may cover those in the future to help you out, to help uh, the channel out, to help out everybody. So, or maybe something you're interested in. Anyways, so we go in the very beginning of this film, and we have Bowling for Soup going on and singing this piece of song here, which I'm like, yeah, I remember this band, Bowling for Soup. So they're at this amusement park, and so we have Jenny and Becky. They're going on and on about boyfriend troubles, because of course they are. So Jenny is convincing Becky, yeah, let's just go to this fortune teller. So if anything, she can tell us your fortune and see that this relationship is not going to work out. So Jenny goes on and makes her way to this fortune teller known as Zila, because it seems that Zila will go on and have quite a bit of interaction going on within this film with other people besides the two characters here, because eventually they're going to end up dead. So Jenny goes on to ask Zila or Zella to read her friend's fortune, but then also go on and say to her, it's like, well, yeah, just tell her and her boyfriend it's not going to work out, so that way it'll finally get this off this girl's mind about this whole relationship. So Zella goes on and looks at the hand of Jenny and finds that her hand is to have what seems to be blood on it. We don't see anything here as viewers, but if anything, the assumption is that Jenny's going to die, that somebody's after her. And Zella is to also look at the hand of Becky and find the same exact result of that. Uh, the two of them are also going to be dying, or going to be killed, and that if anything, they're both in danger. So Zella mentions to the two of them that they should not be fearing of the boy that Becky is to have been with, that if anything, they should be fearing the beast. Whatever that means. If anybody is to go on and to hear that kind of thing, I'd be like, what the heck does the beast mean? But, anyways, we would come to find in this film that since Jake is to seemingly be a ladies' man, and there is to be a kind of certain person scorned in this interaction, we would come to find by the way of which this movie ends up getting put together let's not beat around the bush here. Spoilers, everybody. Uh, there is a woman who is ending up being Joni in this movie, and she is to have had sex with Jake, and she had gotten to become a werewolf through sex with Jake, and Joni eventually is to go after Jake's lovers, so that way she hopes that she would end up with Jake. But eventually, with the way this whole movie plays out, it doesn't transpire that way. But, anyways, so as Zella is to tell Becky the danger that she's to be put in, Zella goes on and tells Becky to fear the moonlight, and Becky is to go on and write this fortune teller's fortune telling as nonsense, and she walks off. So here is where Becky goes on and is to make her way through to the end of this amusement park and find out all of a sudden that her best friend has all of a sudden disappeared, which makes no sense. And she's calling out for her friend Jenny, and she's not there. So, if anything, I'll have to go on and I'll have to look through the cuts of this to try to figure out how much time is passing throughout this film, if the characters look very similar or if they don't. So, we now cut to this, to what looks like this shop. And we would have Jimmy that is going on with his dog Zipper. So Jimmy ends up playing around here that he is to go on and to have lost his dog. And I think that could have been a play for him to go on and start talking with Brooke and kind of do a conversation. We probably could say that Jimmy may honestly go on and do this kind of stuff so that way he can get women. But we don't know with this film. He could be innocent. We have no idea. So as Jimmy is going on and talking to Brooke, who works at this store, we would all of a sudden have Bo and a number of wrestling students be making their way to surround Jimmy, going on and seeing how Bo knows him from PE class, and of course we go on and we start have to have where Jimmy is to be consistently called like a guy that gets hit in the crotch, that he should be wearing a cup, and if anything, he is to also get consistently being called gay. And every single insult coming from Bo is to seem to be that this guy is be written off as consistently trying to say that Jimmy is gay, because internally this guy is suffering from his own issues of hiding the fact that he is gay. So as Jimmy walks off from being tired of being bullied, here's where we go on and we have Ellie. So Ellie is getting a call from of course Jimmy, and he's of course telling Ellie where he's going on and where he's stopping by, because at some point Ellie's going to go on and pick Jimmy up. And eventually we'll come to find through the conversation of the two of them that Jimmy will have been waited for an hour, and Ellie's like, well, I'm sorry, like I was just busy with Jake. So Ellie goes on and meets up with Jake, and we have a large number of just kissing that is going on here. It's like, yeah, we get it, you're a couple, but like they're really going out of the way, like, and then like we go on to just weirdly have uh Jake's character, who's not even satisfied enough by the kissing, is like, one more kiss, like, kiss again. So it's very weird. It's very strange. So Jake is taking Ellie on the cheap tour. So the first thing he shows her is this little torture device, and then further goes on and starts to go through the treasure trove of these little Easter eggs of Universal Monster stuff, eventually making its way to the Wolfman staff, which I had gone on to see both the Wolfman 2010 and, of course, seen quite a bit of the original black and white Wolfman thing, where the original movie is to go on and have this whole like limerick that everybody keeps saying, to where the point of the main character of Wolfman is like, man, does everybody go on to know that limerick? Like, holy like everybody keeps saying that. And in the 2010 movie, we'd come to find that this staff is to be given to the main character because he leaves it in a train, and the guy can't go on and give it to the person that had left it there, so he just hangs on to it. So in this part of the movie, we have Ellie that goes on and picks up the staff, and eventually they will go on and use this staff as a weapon at some point in the film, which is fairly interesting. But yeah, like it's just like they're trying to use these, like, well, obviously you got to use the Wolfman thing in the wolf in a werewolf movie. So Jake is eventually going to go on and talk to Ellie about he wants nothing to do with this building that is going to go on and be opening up soon. That he just wants to go on, and how he just wants to hide away and disappear for 3 days. And Ellie is completely fine with that. She's like, all right, like, you and me shackled in a bed together, all right. Like, and so here's where Jake starts a little bit of distance himself from Ellie. And when I was watching this scene after the fact, or when I was remembering the scene after the fact, where Ellie was going on and talking about how she was really having a bad night, I'm like, really? Was it all that bad? Like, I don't know, like, I just didn't get the feeling that things were rocky and Jake and Ellie's relationship, but maybe I was wrong. Ellie goes on and asks Jake if there is something wrong, and Jake goes on to say that there is nothing wrong. I'm just stressed out with work and madness, and I need some time and space. And Ellie goes on, like, well, okay, well, call me, no pressure, and then she goes on and she walks off. So that scene was just kind of like a little bit weird. Like, there isn't like Jake going on and saying that he's like, yeah, like, I don't think this relationship is going anywhere. Like, he's not going on and like into going on and like, I guess when Ellie was going on and saying like, well, hey, all the better. Like, hey, let's go on and let's spend 3 days in bed together. And like, I guess Jake kind of pulling away from that. Like, maybe that is where Ellie is to go on and have the problem. But if anything, like, I don't know, like, it was so weird, the scene, to where I was just kind of thinking about it through the rest of the film of like, really, was that scene that bad? Like, was that relationship to go on and be on the rocks there? I don't know. Like, I didn't have strong enough feelings about this whole scene. So, pushing on here. So, here is where we have the car ride where Ellie had gone on to pick up Jimmy. And Jimmy's going on and saying, like, I waited for an hour for you. Like, I'm like, whiny baby. Like, I don't need to hear this nonsense. Like, no. Like, if anything, like, I get that a lot of this movie does feel like it's trying to be realistic of a werewolf film. Um, and I get that, like, if you have siblings, they bicker. Um, but I don't know, like, if anything, there may have been a better way to do this argument. Um, but if anything, it just sounds like they're just whiny about it. But anyways, so Jake goes on and mentions about how he waited for an hour, and Ellie is not wanting to go into this argument because of dealing with her issues with Jake, and so Ellie is trying to find out a quick resolution to this argument. She's like, "Well, I'm sorry," and so as the more of them bickering, all of a sudden there is to be this animal that seemingly lodges their way onto their windshield, shattering it. And then all of a sudden, the next thing we see is this shattered windshield leaves these people, of course, not a view to see anything. And they crash their way into this car, which eventually then goes on and has us find out that this is Becky's car, and Becky's car is rolling down this hill. So Jimmy and Ellie at first sort of kind of look at their dog and then make their way to find Ellie. So at some points they're going on and they're trying to help Ellie, but also they're hearing like sounds in the background and they're like, well, hey, maybe we should go on and try to like hurry this together, like because there's some sounds that are going on and kind of being a little weird here. There is also to be at some points in this scene where like there's not an easy way to get Becky out of this, and like it also just seems that they're really like struggling to kind of really want to do anything here. But at some point, luckily, they do go on and they find a way to try and rescue Becky from her getting like stuck in this car. But it just takes a while. So Ellie is talking to Becky here, and is to eventually go on and ask her if she has like uh, a tire iron or like a crowbar in the back of her car. It doesn't matter what really it is, because eventually when she goes on and she tries to look for it, she won't be able to get the back of the car open anyways. So as Ellie used to go on and of course struggle to get the back of Becky's car open, we have Jimmy that's making a 911 phone call because Ellie had gone on to tell Jimmy, hey, yeah, call the cops. So Jimmy goes on, makes his phone call, and he starts to realize that the phone call, like, it's kind of in and out. He goes on and he insults AT&T, his phone provider. But anyways, so Jimmy also goes on and seemingly flags down a car, and it drives by. So Jimmy makes his way down to Ellie, explaining that he had made the 911 phone call. And so Jimmy himself pokes his head into the car to see if he can free Becky, because Becky is starting to get concerned that gas is leaking or that she can smell gas. And they're also going on and pondering whether or not the car is going to explode. So as Jimmy gets into the car, he tries to like muscle or push some things around, hoping that that'll free Becky, and eventually it does. While that's going on, we again have Ellie that is to kind of be hearing the sounds of the rustle of something, And she goes on and says, like, hey, we should probably be acting fast here. So as Becky gets unseatbelted and now is to kind of fall kind of into the to now with her being upside down, the roof of her car, there is an asking of like, okay, can we get you out of here? Like, how hurt are you? And by that time, there is to be the breaking of glass and a werewolf grabbing Becky and pulling her out. Jimmy, of course, is grabbing Becky by the legs, hoping or turning to Ellie to say, hey, yeah, grab me, Ellie, and hope that we can kind of pull her out of this. So we now have this weird train of people that are being dragged by this werewolf. And so this is a horrible scene visually because all we're seeing is like this bit of bushes, and then we're kind of seeing people kind of a little bit in and out here. Um, yeah, this scene is just visually horrible. But if anything, uh, so the pull away is that they could not have saved Becky, and eventually, as the two, both Jimmy and Ellie, make their way back to Becky's car, they're now going on and looking on the chest and arm marks that they both have. So next we'd go on to have the police being called, and actually the police officer in this movie is actually pretty well known, of a guy that I would know from like The Last of Us, who's the guy who's like, this is not an armies. God, is his name like is I think his name is like Nick something, like Nick Offerman or Nick something. I don't quite know if that's his exact name. Um, Maybe it'll say in credits somewhere. Um, Nick Offerman. Oh my god! Wow, what a coincidence. Maybe I just watched enough interviews of him to know what his name is. But yeah, so we have the officer that's going on here, and he's trying to of course get a statement, and we of course have Jimmy that's to try and say that it's a wolf, but the police officer is saying it's like, well, like this attack kind of feels on the level of more of like a mountain lion or a bear, and of course it is because that's always the traditional. Like most of the time, it's like a cougar or it's a bear. Or it's like it's a cougar, mountain lion, or bear. It's some weird, goofy combination of weird animals that they always have to say in every werewolf movie. It can't be like, oh, a pack of wolves. It never makes sense to just say that. Um, yeah, it ends up just being that. So as more as Jimmy wanting to say that it's like a monstrous wolf, we have Ellie that's telling Jimmy, just go and check on the dog. So Jimmy goes on and checks on the dog, and as Jimmy kind of gets his hand out to touch the dog is acting weird. The dog is going on and kind of not being as friendly. It's going on and kind of biting at Jimmy, going on and having his hand now with blood, like, hey, you did this to me. So we come to find out later that Zipper ends up becoming a werewolf himself. And it's because of that whole um, biting of Jimmy's finger. Therein lies the dog becoming a were-dog. Which is honestly, like, I guess it should make sense that that should happen in this film, but also it's just like the werewolf obviously is to be, or the were-dog is to have had to have been forcibly all done with CGI. And like really it's just because we needed to just do more werewolf stuff in this film. Um And like, I guess it was just kind of fun to play around with it, is really what that idea was. But anyways, so we have the police officers that go on and drive both Jimmy and Ellie home. And so, as again, when the two of them get home, we have the dog that is to be nowhere friendly to them and is to just be kind of just scared, and he kind of just runs off on his own. So, having the two of them call him a freak or some kind of weird insult like that. So Ellie goes on and asks Jimmy if they should probably talk about what happened. And Jimmy goes on and talks again about how it doesn't make sense, about how it's a mountain lion or a bear or anything of that. And Ellie's like, well, I didn't see it as good as you did. And kind of when you think about it, that is very true. Like, Jimmy was to have gone on and been holding on to Becky, so if anything, he had enough time to see what that was. Ellie was to have gone on and been further a distance off than Jimmy, so if anything, for her, yeah, there is no way for her to be able to go on and clearly make it out. But anyways, so that's kind of sound of why Ellie didn't know what she saw. Plus, also, it was night. We could always write it off as like, oh, it was dark, but I couldn't see anything, because that's what everybody says. Oh, it's too dark, I couldn't tell. So Jimmy just gives up and walks off, and Ellie's like, well, I'm trying here, I'm trying. Yeah, like, we've tried probably way too much in this movie. Too many reshoots and all kinds of things. Like, I'm sure everybody tried. But if anything, it just left with a bad film at the end of it all. So Ellie goes on to look at a picture frame that at some point she goes on to say is silver. But then Jimmy will go on and flip the frame, and on the back of it, it says stainless steel. And Jimmy's like, ah, you liar. Which, yeah, like, how are you going to know what is silver and what is anything else? That actually is a good criticism about, like, kind of werewolf things. Like, yeah, how are you going to know what exactly is going to be uh, a thing that can kind of do a werewolf in? Like, that's one thing that I wish, like, werewolf movies would probably go on and work out more. That somebody attacks them with something metal, thinking that it's like, oh yeah, this is silver, and it's not. I think that would be kind of a smart film. But anyways, so Jimmy goes on and thumbs his way through a bunch of comic books, which he'll do that a lot more. And so he searches for Wolf LA and goes through the Google search of trying to find werewolves, fact or fiction, or trying to go on and find any unsolved animal attacks if there's a pattern of it in his area. And he goes on to find Google images of people getting clawed or kind of just, I guess, images of animal attacks and what they normally look like. So Ellie gets into her robe and is to make her way through her house. And we have to go through this house here with her just kind of hearing noises and her inspecting and be like, oh, what's in my own house? What's in my own house? This clock better not scare me. In my own house, that I know it goes off consistently, this clock, but it's gotta scare me this time around. So Ellie goes on into her, I think, her kitchen, excuse me, and gets scared by this clock. And so she does more investigating of her own home, and her front door is wide open with this like gust of wind in kind of leaves going back and forth through this door. So as Ellie is to go on and make her way to her door, she gets surprised by Jake of all people. And Jake goes on and apologizes to Ellie. It's like, oh man, I didn't mean to scare you. If anything, I wanted to come in here to talk about like what I was saying before. Like, if anything, like I've just been under like a lot of pressure lately, and yeah, like I'm just scared, Ellie. I'm sorry. So the two of them go on and hug it out, and all of a sudden, Ellie goes on and like rears her head back and bites onto Jake, and then all of a sudden we have these flashes of all these like werewolf things. Ellie has yellow eyes, like probably a number of just footage that they were probably going to actually use at some point in this movie, but they just thought to just randomly just splash it all in here because they just wanted to just get every nickel and dime of whatever crap that they could just use in this movie. Plus, also to make it the cliche of just kind of werewolf things, or we just have these weird flashes of all these kind of crazy things that make no sense. So Ellie goes on and wakes up from her bed because this was a dream happening sequence. And so as she goes on and wakes up in her bed, without any knowledge of how she probably even got there, we then also have Jimmy that's to be waking up in the bushes near his home, naked, oblivious of how that was to have gone on and happened. And all of a sudden, his neighbor that is going on and watering the lawn is to have seen Jimmy, like, eh? Like, what's going on? And Jimmy runs back into his home, into one of his windows. He climbs his house to get back into his room so that way he can get some clothes on this day. So Ellie goes on and tunes into the news going on and finding out about the whole accident that was to happen last night, as seemingly there's a bit of news that is covering this. So going on and mentioning that there's speculation of a bear or just a mention of a fatal attack. So Ellie goes on and shows us that her now arm has a bit of bandaging on it. And eventually she'll go on with Kyle and make a whole joke about it. But anyways, so Jimmy and Ellie go on to meet in the kitchen, and Jimmy goes on and mentions about how he'd gone on to wake up in the bushes naked. And Ellie goes through the traditional thing of like, well, are you feeling okay? Should we call the doctor? Like, I don't think he has any cure for lycanthrope. But hey, yeah, give the doc a call. Like, let's see what he goes on and he says. But anyways, so we have Jimmy that continues to just gnaw on a thing of bacon or jerky or whatever this meat is. I'm not quite sure exactly what it was. But anyways, so Ellie is to say that maybe they should probably go on and go to the doctor anyways because maybe the animal that attacked them had rabies. Well, sound thought there. So but Jimmy is to be like, oh, so you believe that this attack may have happened from a wolf, huh? Like, because if anything, Ellie is to kind of lean into that now. So Jimmy starts talking about the full moon cycle and and starts talking about all the werewolf information that he is to have gone on and and quickly researched. And Ellie's like, couldn't you just download porn like a normal kid? So Jimmy's like, well, hey, I'm just talking here. I'm just trying to make conversation. So they're making jokes about like werewolf movies, how like werewolves are going on and trying to find women that had the biggest breasts and everything like that, and also why should Jimmy go to school today? Because if anything, he had gotten bitten by a werewolf. Shouldn't that have given him a day off? So we then cut to Ellie that makes her way to work. And here's where she bumps into Kyle and they start to talk about her bandage. And weirdly, Kyle is going on and kind of hitting on Ellie for some reason, because we come to find that when people start turning into a werewolf, that all of a sudden we have people that are to go on and be attracted to, of course, Ellie and Jimmy, to even to the point to where Bo goes on and is to come into attraction of Jimmy. And that's when Bo goes on and says to Jimmy, it's like, well, hey, I'm gay. Like you're gay, right? All right. Like, and that's when Jimmy's like, no, I'm a werewolf. Anyways, so after Ellie goes on and has this conversation with Kyle, she transitions to Joni. So they start talking about Scott Baio, and they're talking about the future interview that he's going to have on this talk show. And so Joni is setting up Ellie here to like, oh yeah, you're gonna go on, you're gonna talk to Scott Baio about the pre-interview thing that he's gonna have. So if anything, like, is that what you're gonna wear? Like, so Ellie goes on to get into her office, and so the two of them are kind of both Kyle and both Ellie are talking smack about Joni, and all of a sudden we have a one point where Ellie is mentioning about how things are to smell. Ellie goes on and starts to make her way through the office and comes to find the only thing that she is to enjoy the smell of the most, or have the most powerful smell of, is eventually a person having a nosebleed in the lunch area. And so weirdly, and here's what the weirdest scene is of this entire film, if there's not so many of them anyways. This same girl who is to go on and have this nosebleed is to come into the bathroom with Ellie and ask her if she's okay. But that's not really good enough now, is it? Like, this girl needs to go on and try to open this bathroom stall while Ellie is also holding the bathroom stall herself, trying to keep it closed. But this girl is just stubbornly like, no, I have to see what's wrong with Ellie, because this girl is just freaking, why? Why do you need to know? Also, like, it's that is just so like a person that just is too effing nosy for their own good. If anything, that woman deserved to have been like turned into a werewolf or had something bad happen to her. Like traumatized, like scared, something. Like, because that person is stupid. Like, that's the person that goes on and is to hear like a horrible sound going on in their house and has to investigate it, knowing all good and well that it's going to lead to their death, but they're just like, no, I just need to see what this is. And then inevitably, when they find out that it's a murderer or a killer or whatever, they're like, oh, murderer, how dare you be here? Duh, like, shouldn't you have gone on and realized that was going to happen? Anyways, so after the whole Ellie going on and noticing the girl having the nosebleed, we then cut to Jimmy, who has made his way to school. Come to find out, Brooke, the girl prior that was going on and working at that one store or that one, like, I'm not sure if she was working at a movie theater or where exactly she was working at. But anyways, so Jimmy goes on and notices that Brooke is having trouble with her dollar going into the vending machine, and so he goes on to try and help her out. This girl, like, or Jimmy is going on and really just working on this girl just so well in this film. He's trying to figure out every freaking way to get an interaction with this girl. Like, I would not go on and give her the time or effing day, but like Jimmy just keeps going out of his way to keep talking to this girl, which leads to, by the end of the film, the two of them going on and they kiss by the end of the film. But it just feels so bizarre because it feels like it's a thing that they had to have happen by the end of the film, as well as also Jimmy walking away with her to go with Bo just right off into the sunset, just effing somewhere. Like, just that's my biggest problem is the ending. But just like, just it makes no sense. The ending is just like, what the is this? But anyways, so I'm getting lost in the weeds. My apologies, as I always do. So Jimmy is going on and trying to help Brooke with her change, and so this then leads Bo to talk to Jimmy again. It's like, oh, hey, Jimmy, yeah, like, you see the sign about wrestling school? Are you gonna go on and are you gonna enroll? I'm sure you will, because I'm sure you like to go on and wrestle guys now, don't you? And so Jimmy is going on and kind of giving like a him and a ha of whether or not he's gonna go on and and go or do anything there. Um, but it seems that he does go on and make his way to the place where these guys are wrestling. Like, isn't that a bit of a mistake to go on and obviously go to the location that your bullies are at? But also, I think that maybe Jimmy is just trying to figure out more ways to be with Brooke or talk to her. But also, like, Jimmy could have gone on and avoided this whole trouble of being bullied more. Like, this guy's just a glutton for punishment, I guess, at this point. But anyways, so uh so Brooke is telling Jimmy just to ignore Bo as the two of them walk off. So now we have Ellie making her way to what looks like a costume party of sorts. And either that or people are just really dressing nice, but it looks like most of the people are kind of in costume. It's kind of half in, half out. So Ellie goes on to this party and sees Jake there. But her main reason for her going on and being at this party is she's going to go on and talk to Scott Baio and mention what exactly it is that they're going to go on and do in this interview. Basically going over Scott's greatest hits with like Joni Loves Chachi and the projects that he's Charles in Charge and stuff that he's gone on and done in the past, and then eventually talk about his newer projects. And for Scott Baio to be playing Scott Baio in this movie, it's kind of weird for Scott Baio to go on and be very handsy with this woman. But I get that this movie is to say it's like, well, this woman has these like pheromones, and there's an aura about her that is to go on and make her attracted to all males or whatever. So even a celebrity is falling victim to this girl going on and having these pheromones or whatever about her that is going to go on and make her attract. So to even have a celebrity actually playing himself to be attracted to this girl, I guess that says a lot about how effective that this whole thing is for this werewolf becoming. But I guess also you could say that in the credits, Scott Baio is to not play himself. It says that Scott Baio is playing Scott Baio, whatever that means. But anyways, so Ellie goes on and she meets up with Jake, and Ellie's like, "Oh, so you aren't gonna hide off then? So I guess you are coming to your opening." And so and Jake is kind of trying to be apologetic. It's like, well, yeah, I guess that didn't kind of go over very well. I guess and Jake is like, well, yeah, we've only kind of been a couple for a couple of months now. So really, he's like, you know what, it's fine. Like, if you need your space, like it's okay. And so the more and more that they try to talk here, Jake goes on and mentions about how like he normally goes on into a pattern of certain relationships. How when he realizes that things are kind of getting serious, he starts to kind of push away, and he can't go on and explain why, but eventually he'll go on to explain that he is to have been born a werewolf, so maybe that's the reason why he doesn't go on and exactly be able to get close to anybody, because eventually they'll find out that he's a freaking werewolf. But also, in Jake's case, the main reasoning for him to go on and besides becoming a werewolf uh, is clearly because if he goes on and has sex with a woman like he had gone on to have sex with Joni, she may become a werewolf herself. And Jake doesn't know that Ellie is a werewolf already. But eventually, when Jake does go on and find both Ellie and Jimmy are werewolves anyways, then Jake goes on to be like, well, hey, how about we become a family? Well, with the exclusion of Jimmy. Because eventually, when it comes to the later part of the film, Jake goes on and wants to kind of get rid of Jimmy, which becomes the whole battle of the tail end of the film. But anyways, so Jake mentions to Ellie that he doesn't want to lose her, and for her to just kind of deal with him for a little bit longer, and maybe things will be smoothed over. And so Ellie's like, well, yeah, like maybe if we just go on and maybe we have a place to talk. So all of a sudden, Jenny comes into the scene here, and Joni comes in also. Joni mentions to Ellie, hey, yeah, you should probably go on and speak to Scott Baio. And Jenny is going on and speaking to Jake. Jenny goes on and is to talk to Jake about, like, well, hey, yeah, like, my friend has been having a really tough time um, with dealing with the fact that the two of you were dating, and Jake is like, oh yeah, like, well, if anything, you should probably tell Becky that if anything, I'm gonna be soon off the market. So weirdly, we go on to have Jenny, who's like, oh well, like, if anything, my friend will go on and not hear that, but even I won't like to hear that. And Jake's like, oh. But I guess when we come to find that Jake is a werewolf and he's attracted by all women, then I guess that is to go on and actually make sense. So that's why, like, all these women are after Jake, because he's a born werewolf. And so I'm like, oh yeah, so that's why it makes sense that he has so many women after him. Ah, yeah, yeah, that does make sense now. So, here's where Ellie sits down with Scott Baio and says everything that I've already said already. And so Ellie gets, of course, uncomfortable with Scott Baio touching her leg and tries to cut every bit of this interview now short and tells Scott to meet him in the studio. At some point, when Ellie talks to uh, the talk show host, eventually he'll go on and he'll mention that he's going to bump Scott Baio and he's going to just let Carrot Top go along. And then eventually Joni is upset with Ellie because it's like, well, hey, wait a minute, like you aren't gonna let Scott Baio be on the show, and Ellie's like, well, hey, that was the host's decision, not my decision. So after Ellie goes on and talks with Scott Baio, she starts walking away to then be met again by Jake. So as they're talking, there's a bit of conversation about not feeling well, and Jenny comes up from behind to speak to Ellie and mention about how Jake is trouble. So as Jenny passes, Ellie goes on and asks, like, well, who's the leopard? And Jake just mentions it's somebody I met before. And Ellie's like, well, yeah, like it seems like a lot of women start to pop up around you nowadays. And so Ellie is still going on and pondering the fact of like, oh, so maybe that's why you wanted to disappear for a couple days. So Jake is going on and trying to be like, well, people could change. Like, oh yeah, like if anything, like it was nice that Jake was going on and telling Jenny that it's like, oh yeah, like it seems that I'm gonna be off the market soon because it seems like he's gonna go on and end up with Ellie. But anyways, so Ellie goes on and makes her way to her car, and so does Jenny. As Jenny starts to make her way to her car, she weep weep with her alarm, and then all of a sudden she finds on the ground of this parking lot that there is this weird, I'm assuming blood stain, but if anything, there's this weird bit of kind of residue on the ground that has an implement of human footprints, and then those human footprints go on to eventually turn into a wolf paw or a dog paw. So as we are to go on here and have Jenny making her way to her car, she goes on and she gets attacked by this wolf and kind of gets thrown back, and it's all of a sudden find these paws that are or these wolf legs that are kind of protruding from the other end of this car. So Jenny is now in this parking lot trying to figure out a way to outsmart this werewolf. And she goes on and sneaks underneath these cars for the werewolf to try to go on and try to back around to try to figure out where she is. The werewolf tries to use its senses to try to track her down, and so when the werewolf goes on and looks underneath the cars, Jenny's no longer underneath the car. She's hiding on the side of one of the cars, like holding on for dear life. So at one point, the werewolf goes on and takes its claws and claws through one of the cars, and it's to try to see if Jenny makes any noises to try to figure out where she is. And it seems like she doesn't make any. So Jenny goes on to start to hit car alarms of certain cars, so it makes the werewolf's hearing to, of course, be impaired. And so Jenny makes a break for the elevator. So as Jenny is trying to get the elevator door closed, we'd come to find that the werewolf is strong enough to bash through the door and try to get the door open. It seems that there is to be the bottom half of this elevator that is now stuck, and Jenny is trying to call somebody to hope that someone's going to help her, and this werewolf is throwing out its hands and trying to get to Jenny. So at one point, Jenny is to go on and be like, well, okay, since this elevator is kind of in the middle of floors, and she's like, well, hey, how about I go on and how about I open up the top floor of this elevator to hope that I can get out of this elevator this way. All of a sudden, she would come to find that the werewolf lunges at her, attacks her, and kills her. We're left to believe that off screen. So the next thing we see is Jimmy going into more books about werewolves. Jimmy goes on and sees a bit of photos of kind of old-fashioned werewolf-like things, the transformation of a werewolf, which I'm not thinking that is going to be at all quite accurate, or don't really quite understand why they would go on to the trouble of making a depiction of what a realistic werewolf could look like in that wouldn't make any sense. So, like, is there actual proof of a werewolf transformation anywhere? Doesn't seem like it, only in the movies. But anyways, so as Jimmy is scrolling through the pages of this book, he would come to find that there is to be a hand that has these 5 marks on it. And I had to do the math there. I'm stupid. So Jimmy goes on and looks at his own hand and realizes that there's 5 marks on there, like we see here. So Jimmy goes on to take this marker and match up the markings to realize, oh my god, he has the same exact thing on his hands like it does in the book. It becomes the star. So Jimmy, of course, is to be very freaked out by that. And so as Ellie comes in to try to discover what Jimmy is doing, and he explains that he's doing homework, and Ellie looks into the books and's like, oh, how you can kill a werewolf? Silver, right? And so Jimmy goes on to realize that, yeah, there is, of course, the silver bullet. Like, silver does hurt werewolves a lot. But if anything, there is just the separating from head from the rest of the body that is also to kind of do the werewolf in. So as Ellie and Jimmy start to look through these books, and Ellie is to try to convince Jimmy that they live in reality, how werewolves aren't a real thing. So Jimmy goes on and is to show Ellie the points on his hand. And eventually, as Jimmy is to look at Ellie's hand, he realizes that she has points on her hand also. So Ellie is washing everything off as like, well, hey, like we went through a traumatic experience, and that brought off a lot of stuff for the two of us. Yeah. Like, and Ellie is going on and bringing up stuff about their mother and father, which I don't think ends up getting fully explained here. But anyways, so Ellie going on and trying to disprove Jimmy here that they're not werewolves. Ellie goes on and gets to the picture frame. She goes on to state that it's silver, which I've already ruled out that it's not. It's stainless steel. And Ellie's like, well, hey, if I pick up this thing that obviously is steel or is steel, it really is steel. But as she says it's silver, right? I should be able to pick it up and I should be in pain, right? So she picks up the frame and nothing happens. And so she's like, so does that prove that that I'm not a werewolf? And so Ellie tells Jimmy to go to bed, and Jimmy starts reading werewolf comic books. And all of a sudden, Jimmy goes on and hears outside all these dogs barking. Jimmy goes on to just start to get annoyed with the dogs continuously barking and making noise to the point where he himself lets out this big, huge howl. Where all of a sudden, all the dogs start to run off, and Jimmy's like, oh, okay, well, I got that going for me. So the following, I think this is the following day. Oh yeah, because it would make sense because Ellie is going into work. So the two of them are getting ready, both Jimmy and Ellie, into the bathroom, kind of sharing the bathroom. And Ellie's going on to talk to Jimmy about how she's working tonight. Okay, the Craig Ferguson show, the Craig show. That's the name of the host. I couldn't think of the name. Uh, so Ellie is talking to Jimmy about how she's working the red carpet tonight, and Jimmy's like, "Oh, okay, all right." All right. So Ellie goes on and makes her way to work, and Kyle goes on and is starting to hit on Ellie, mentioning about how she's wearing clothes that are kind of unlike her, but also he goes on and says how uh, she looks kind of hot, and Ellie's just a little confused by Kyle. It's like, okay, whatever. Also, the very first time we see Kyle, Michael Rosenbaum, we have to assume that probably Michael probably had a wig here because Smallville filming and stuff. But anything, the very first time we see Kyle, this does look like a wig. But I think the following times we do get to see him, like I think his wig is better. Um, but yeah, like if Michael Rosenbaum was not wearing a wig in this film, like I would be shocked. Because it just looks like a wig. But if anything, also there's a lot of times where I thrust on a wig, obviously, because I can't grow out hair for like I obviously even in the thumbnail of this had to wear a wig just to have a different kind of style of hair, even though I kind of have enough hair on here still. Um, yeah, like if anything, I'm sure it probably doesn't look the. It looks good enough. Like it looks like I can kind of pull it off, maybe a little bit. But anyways, uh, so here is where Kyle is going on and mentioning to Ellie how they have some auditions for some gypsies, and one of the gypsies ends up being uh, the Zella or the Zila, the fortune teller from the beginning of the movie, And so that's how we bring her back into the film. So if there was skepticism that Ellie wasn't thinking that she was a werewolf before, we have the gypsy that goes on and sees Ellie and immediately comes to her and grabs her and tells her, "You're in danger." And so Zelda goes on to explain to this woman, it's like, it'll come for you. And then she looks at her hand, it's like, oh, you have the mark of the beast. And so Ellie goes on to explain in a very lazy way to this girl, it's like, you're infected. And like, it's like, you're infected. Like, you're a werewolf. Like, so the gypsy goes on and tries to explain about breaking the curse, and then Kyle comes in like, hey, like, hey, crazy woman, if anything, maybe we should be getting some security in here. So now we cut to Jimmy making his way to the wrestling tryouts. So we see just a number of people that are all going on and doing amateur wrestling. But when we have Jimmy come in and he's supposedly doing wrestling, all of a sudden it goes from amateur wrestling to then professional wrestling, like the stuff you see on AWs or WWEs. Like, we all of a sudden have Jimmy that's doing like a Hurricane Rana or is doing like this weird suplex. And I'm like, none of that is actually amateur wrestling. Like, they're going on and they're kind of really getting it very murky about the whole wrestling thing. But also, the circle that they're inside of, they go all over the place. They just go all over the mat. Like, it doesn't matter if they're outside of the circle or not. They're just doing whatever in this movie because it feels like they've completely ditched the whole amateur wrestling idea. And they're just like, okay, whatever. Like, let's just do whatever that looks more enticingly cool looking in this movie. We also have to where all of a sudden when we find out that Jimmy is kind of out muscled even Bo, that this other kid kind of runs in and is like, hey, I'll go in and I'll jump in the mix here too. And then we have this like weird flinging of these two characters to just show how strong Jimmy really is, and everybody's like, oh wow, look at that kid. All right. Like, it's so stupid. But anyways, so and all of a sudden all the cheerleaders and all the girls are like, oh my god, Jimmy, yeah, ooh, ah. Like, really? Like, okay. So, but I guess that's to say that all the women are just attracted to Jimmy anyways. But so let's go into this. So Brooke is going on and talking to all the girls about looking at Bo, and as Bo is going on and talking to somebody, and then Jimmy goes on and jumps his way into the bleachers, and everybody can kind of really hear him coming in. And so Jimmy turns to Brooke and is like, oh, hey, hi. And there's a whole joke about, hey, are you stalking me? And so shortly they're here after Jimmy and Brooke have a conversation. Here's where Bo comes in, and there's a joke about Abercrombie. I'm sure people probably don't even know what Abercrombie even is anymore. Is that still a thing? Like, I know there was the whole Abercrombie and Fitch like advertisement where there's a bunch of people just shirtless, which is a stupid advertisement for an Abercrombie thing. But I think that's when the company went really downhill. Uh, but anyways, let me know any different. Maybe it still exists somewhere. Anyways, so as of course, Bo and Jimmy start to bicker again. Here's where Jimmy goes on and starts to say how Bo is to have so many of these like homophobic like insults to him, and Bo goes on and tells him he needs to watch his ass, and it's like, man, again with all the so Bo goes on and asks Jimmy, it's like, hey, you're gonna try out for the team? Like, yeah, like, isn't that really what you're here for? And we all of a sudden have this coach involved, and so Bo ends up turning to the coach like, "Yeah, Jimmy's gonna try to join the team." And the coach is like, "Is this really what you want, Jimmy?" And Jimmy's like, "Sure, why not?" So Jimmy goes on and goes up against one guy who I'll call blonde hair dude. And so uh blonde hair dude goes on and tells Jimmy to get away from his groin, and so the two of them wrestle. So it seems that blonde hair dude goes on and takes down Jimmy, and then continues to just start to kind of tossle or throw him around to where they're asking Jimmy, "Hey man, you've had enough?" And so the further we go along with Jimmy, with this kid, at some point he gets the better of him, and then so Bo is to jump in like, "Hey, let me go on, let me wrestle him." And the coach is like, "Okay, sure, whatever." So Bo gets in there and starts wrestling Jimmy, and here is where uh they start going all over the place. That uh if anything, Jimmy is obviously out strengthening Bo. The other guy tries to jump in. There's a huge flip around. We get the big, huge, massive suplex here, and here, of course, is where Jimmy tells Bo, it's like, well, hey, the one thing about fairies is that they always fly, and so after he goes on and he suplexes, kind of an unconventional, very strange suplex, but either way, it's a suplex. It's basically the same mechanics of it. Uh, if anything, I don't know how he's actually holding this guy for very long, like he is, anyways. You would think that would probably snap his neck or something. But anyways, so they do the suplex, and all the girls are clapping. Oh, Jimmy, Jimmy, yeah, woo! So Ellie is going on and speaking with Craig, and here's where he's going on, and he's talking about uh, what they're going to do on the show next, and here's where he goes on and talks about how he wants to go on and have to bump Bayo and have Carrot Top go long, and so Craig starts to talk about how his mouth is dry, and all of a sudden he has this paper cut and or this cut on his finger. Ellie doesn't know what to do, and Craig is like, "Well, don't just look at it." So Ellie goes on and sucks off this guy's finger, and I'm kind of curious if that is to go on and also make a werewolf transformation, because we had just had the dog wolf. So, like, were they going to go on, or were they going to try to goofingly, stupidly do here that Craig was going to become a werewolf himself at some point in this movie to just do something stupid in this film? Uh, if anything, maybe there was something left on the drawing board to have like something like that just weirdly happen. But anyways, so Ellie goes on and makes her way out of the stage to start to storm off here, and Joni follows her. So Joni starts to argue with Ellie about like, well, hey, like you bumped Bayo, and Ellie's like, well, hey, yeah, Craig was saying that. So Ellie is going on and saying that he'll make it up to, or Ellie's going on to say that she will make it up to Bayo and she'll make it up to Joni, and the more and more that they start to argue, eventually Ellie does walk off or run off, and she makes her way to the bathroom. Here is where Ellie is to go on and start to feel the aches and pains of a werewolf. where it seems that she's starting to get angry. So here's where Ellie goes on and makes her way into the bathroom stall to try to hide her soon to becoming uh, a person that is kind of going through werewolf pains. So this woman comes in after the girl that suffered the nosebleed before and starts to make her way to the sink and is to be asking Ellie if she is to be okay because she just doesn't sound right. The girl keeps going on and getting close to the bathroom stall, is to go on and push open the bathroom stall. Ellie goes on and grabs the bathroom stall and is to press the bathroom stall so hard that her fingers are starting to bleed. And the girl even points it out to her. So finally, as the girl is to open the bathroom stall wide enough, the girl gets freaked out by Ellie and she runs off. And Ellie closes the bathroom stall again. So Jake goes on to prepare this mirror room. And while that's going on, we have Jimmy, who appears here because he's going to be there early so that way he can make it in time. Or no, wait. Uh, so Jimmy is there to go on and speak to Jake because he can't go on and speak to Ellie about this, and Jake is hoping that, or Jake, um, Jimmy is hoping that Jake will be more open minded because, of course, he has wax figures of all these Universal monsters than Ellie. So, plus with this whole mirror room thing, you'd think that yeah, he'd be a little bit more open minded to kind of anything. So so here is where Jimmy starts talking to Jake and starts to talk about how after a certain passing of time that things have started to become a lot more different. That if anything, like Ellie hasn't told Jake much, but if anything, they had a wreck at this canyon and a girl was killed, and she was evidently ripped apart by some kind of animal. And the conclusion that Jimmy had was that the animal was a werewolf, and Jimmy is to say that he may, with his sister, possibly be becoming one. And so Jimmy tells Jake that it's like, well, yeah, you know my sister, she won't go on and believe this, but maybe you'll be more open minded, and she won't think that we'll be cursed, we'll be becoming a werewolf. But if anything, um, like Jimmy is hoping to see what Jake will say about this, and Jake goes on and tells Jimmy, it's like, well, yeah, I think we need to calm down. If anything, uh, the best thing we can do is just call up your sister. And Jimmy's like, that's not the answer that I wanted. And so Jake is telling Jimmy, it's like, well, maybe we all need to sit down together and all discuss this. And Jimmy's like, well, yeah, if we wait any longer, bad things are going to start happening. And Jake is like, listen to yourself. Werewolves? None of this makes sense. Because, of course, it's the cliche of every horror film to deny, deny, deny. Like, it goes on and goes to the fabric of every horror film that anybody will not go on and believe the main character. It's like always the boy that didn't exactly cry wolf, but every time everyone is to go on and not believe that someone is to go on and say that somebody's true. Also, like there's a lot of times when you go on and you're like, you know what, I really feel very sick. And he always kind of hem and hawed of whether or not that you should probably go on and go to the hospital and or maybe have a doctor's appointment. And there's a lot of times where you're probably just like, well, like, I don't know, I think that I'm just probably maybe dealing with a cold or dealing with a this or that. But yeah, there's a lot of times you're just not very sure, like what's kind of going on. So if anything, yeah, like that's the whole thing of like, well, uh are you really sick, or are you just kind of going through something, like, or is there something that is really going wrong and maybe you should finally get it checked out. um yeah, there's some times where like I would go on and like I would be just kind of very unsure whether or not that I should probably go and maybe have doctor's appointments. um like there's a lot of times where I just assume maybe I just have a cold. um or there's sometimes where I'm just like, man, like I've been kind of just been dealing with something for a very long time now, and it's just kind of like, well, should I go to the doctor? Yeah, like it's always the question of that, because I just don't go willy nilly to just go to the doctor. But anyways, um, so now we cut to Jimmy that is go on and just be kind of upset with Jake's response, and Jake is a hope, or Jimmy is to hope that Jake can just kind of pretend that he didn't tell him anything and like, hey, I'm sorry to bother you. Like, I know that you're really busy. If anything, this was kind of a mistake. And so he walks off. So Jimmy goes on and makes his way on home, and he goes on to take this big, huge thing of steak that he doesn't cook, and he is to just kind of take from this packaging and just be contemplating eating, which is just very strange. And so here is where Jimmy goes on to take from his silverware drawer and notices this kind of pie knife, and or this kind of just this pie kind of cutter of things. And so Jimmy goes on and clutches onto this thing, and that's where he has the pain of this being silver, and so he drops it. Shortly thereafter that, Jimmy is to be met by Bo, who's at his door. So here's where Bo goes on and comes to Jimmy. It's like, well, yeah, like Bo is to go on and be very apologetic to Jimmy and be like, well, yeah, you know what, I'm sorry that I was to bully you, and if anything, maybe I bullied you because I'm going through the same thing that you're going through, and so yeah, because Bo is to be gay, and so like for some reason Jimmy kind of knew that he was, and then also it's like, well, hey, how is that you knew that I was gay? Like, is it because you're gay yourself? And Bo was like, no, 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 like I'm not gay. Like if anything, I'm just a like I have the mark of the beast. Like I'm a werewolf, and so there is this moment where Bo is just like, hey, yeah, nice joke, like, yeah, whatever. And so, and Jimmy's just like, well, yeah, like, I'm happy for you, like, yay, gay, like, it's a good thing. And so Jimmy goes on and tries to make his way back to his home to look at the picture frame and realize that it was stainless steel, and he calls his sister a liar. And then he makes his way back to get to the meat and find his dog with the meat in his mouth. So as Jimmy tries to go after the dog, uh, um, he would come to find the closer and closer he would go underneath the table, the dog would all of a sudden lunge on top of him and start to try and attack him because now he's a were-dog. So Jimmy separates himself from the dog and starts running away to get to Bo, closing the door. And Bo wants to go on and wants to continue their discussion, but Jimmy's like, "Hey, we need to get the heck out of here." And Bo's like, "What are you talking about?" The dog starts smashing through the house trying to get to them, and so Bo's like, "Oh yeah, we need to get the heck out of here." They scramble into the car. The dog starts to beat down onto Bo's car, and they drive like crazy to get out of there as they're kind of being chased by the dog up into a certain point where they drive off. So so Bo goes on and it's like, well, hey, what the heck happened there? Like, what kind of dog do you have? And Jimmy goes on to explain so that way the audience knows about how or why the dog became a were dog because of the whole bite from before. So now we have Ellie in her office and she goes on to watch the news and is seeing about how there is a now television news report about two animal deaths coming in from both Jenny and from both Becky, I guess, confirming their deaths. A little late to that, like when they've gone on and shown that Becky had died on the news. Um, Also, I guess, like, now I guess Ellie is finding out that both of these girls are dead. But, anyways, so Kyle comes in and is to start to talk to Ellie about, like, well, hey, yeah, like, uh, you can drive, I'll drink. And Ellie just turns to Kyle. It's like, what? Like, Ellie is wanting to go on and tell Kyle that she's going home. And Kyle is talking to Ellie about this big opening. So for Jake's opening, the whole wax thing. So Ellie makes her way to the car and Jake is there. So Jake of course scared Ellie and so Jake ends up telling Ellie that he needs to talk to her. That she hasn't returned his phone calls. And so Ellie talks about how Becky and Jenny are now dead. And how, of course, Ellie used to talk about how Jake had a prior connection with those girls, and now how they're dead has kind of left her to kind of just feel weird about that situation. So Jake goes on to say to Ellie that he can explain everything, and he puts his hand onto the window, and Ellie notices that his hand has the star mark because for some odd reason Jake would go on to have not have he made the whole star thing on his hand too. And I guess he didn't wipe it off like Jimmy did. So, but I guess we really have to go on and we have to put this makeup onto people's hands so that way it's significant for them to see the mark of the star on their hands because otherwise the people wouldn't know. So Jake goes on, breaks the glass of Ellie's car, takes the keys out of her car, and is hoping that then she will finally get out of the car so they can talk. So Jake apologizes for the breaking the window, and so Jake is in desperation here because he feels that something is coming for him. And as Jake goes on and gives Ellie the keys to her car back, Ellie prepares the keys so that way she can go on and lunge them at Jake, so that way she can free herself away from him, and so that way she has time to run away from him. So we now get to Jake's big opening, and there's to be a kind of a car that comes out, and it's none other than NSYNC's Lance Bass. He's playing himself in this film. Because of course he is. So, following up after Lance making his way into this opening, we then have both Jake and... Or Jake. I keep getting them confused. Jimmy and Bo making their way into this this Jake's opening also. So with honestly this place, you wouldn't be able to go on and probably be able to hear a phone call, let alone be able to have a conversation with somebody. But for this movie's sake, we have to go on. We have to do this because if anything, like when I went on and when I went to my prom, I had my phone with me, and in all honesty, I couldn't hear my phone ringing, and even my phone was on vibrate, and I couldn't hear it go off. Um, but yeah, like so in this environment, like I wouldn't think that a guy like Jimmy would be able to get to his phone or hear it go off or whatever. So Ellie is talking to Jimmy on the phone, and Jimmy is telling Ellie that he's made his way to the grand opening because he knew that Ellie would be there. And Jimmy tells Ellie to not go to the house because if anything, the dog uh, is to have turned into a werewolf. And so Ellie is finally relenting to Jimmy that he finally believes her, and if anything, she'll believe anything at this point. So Ellie goes on and explains to Jimmy that it's quite possibly that Jake is to have been the one that may have attacked and hurt both of them. And here's where we start to turn to have this be the who done it kind of thing, which regardless of who actually did it, it won't matter anyways because it'll end up being Jake in the end anyways. Will be how everything all kind of turns out. So Ellie is assuming Jake is the werewolf, and uh, so Ellie goes on and tells Jimmy to find Kyle and if anything, just to kind of stay low. And Ellie will try to get there as soon as she can. So, so Jake makes his way into his grand opening and meets up with Joni, and the two of them are talking. And so Joni is mentioning about how great everything looks, and Jake is kind of like, yeah, I don't really want to talk to you, but I just so happen to meet you, so I have to. So Jake goes on and asks Joni if she sees Ellie, and so Jake goes on and is to try to get away uh from Joni because he's trying to introduce him to Scott, and it's like, oh, good, great. But if anything, Scott goes on and or Scott, Jake goes on and meets up with Jimmy, and wait a minute, wait. I got a little bit confused here. Um, Jimmy passes Jake, and so that's the little thing I got confused. Jimmy passes Jake. He walks by him, and so Jake is trying to excuse himself so that way he can get to Jimmy to blow them off anyways, both Joni and Scott, because who cares, right? So Jake goes on and tries to get to Jimmy, and both Jimmy and Bo are talking about have they seen Ellie yet, and Jimmy and Bo are noticing Jake in the background, and Jake is going on and asking security if he's gone on to see Jimmy, and if anything, if they see him to kind of get to him. And so got a little ahead of myself. Um, so we then cut to Jimmy and Bo trying to hide out, and we have Ellie that makes her way into the party to speak with Kyle. And so Ellie goes on and asks Kyle if he's gone on to see Jimmy, and Ellie's mentioned about how it's an emergency, and they're talking about Craig, and so Ellie goes on and leaves and runs off to find where her brother is, and makes her way into the mirror room where Jimmy and Bo are also in there. Jake tries to get in the mirror room also, and so here is where Jake is to finally tell Ellie what he was trying to tell her earlier, that there is a beast after him, and he doesn't know who it is, but if anything, uh, that's the one who had gone on to kill those girls, not him. And so the further along we go in here, we have this glass that shatters, a werewolf that goes on and attacks, I think both Jake and Bo. And so we have this scrambling of Jimmy and Ellie trying to get away from this monster. We have at one point where Ellie is going on and like scrambling through this little this very tight area, and the werewolf is like bashing through these walls, or bashing through this wall to try to get to Ellie to try to grab her. So as Ellie scrambles to get this security guard, hoping that there's going to be a radio of help, here is where the werewolf goes on and starts to attack people, starts chucking people, and eventually everybody's starting to scramble out of this grand opening. And Ellie's going on and asking people again if they've seen her brother. So there is to be one guy by the gate that is going on and closing this gate, and he goes on of like, well, yeah, the only person that I've seen is that thing, the monster thing. So now Ellie has to decide whether or not she's going to go back into this place to find her brother, or just stay by this gate. And so she decides to roll through the gate to try to find out where her brother is, where she finds um, him briefly uh, after she goes through this little hallway here. So the two of them realize that they need to get the heck out of there. That's when they meet up with Kyle. So Ellie and Jimmy are concerned that maybe Kyle could be the werewolf. So what they go on and they do is they ask Kyle to go on and reveal his hand, and so he lifts up his hand, and they say, "Okay, lift up the other one." And Kyle's like, "Hey, we don't have enough time to screw around here. Come on, let's." I absolutely loved that. So as Ellie and as Jimmy are to look for a way out of here, we have Kyle that's looking in the other direction, and then all of a sudden, the werewolf goes on and grabs Jimmy by the head, pulls him up, and he all of a sudden is to disappear. And both Ellie and Jimmy are like, well, where the heck did he go? They would all of a sudden go on to see uh, as they kind of look up, because no one ever looks up. I guess that's the whole thing of no one ever looks up. They would see that Kyle's body is to fall up onto the ground, now dead. And so now Ellie and Jimmy are scrambling uh, through this building. And then there is to go on and be the reveal of who the werewolf actually is, and it's Joni. Yeah, like, if anything, whoever this would have been would not have been a good enough reveal, because I guess, like, you really just have to go on and just been like, it could have been anybody. Like, uh, if anything, it didn't make sense to have it be Kyle because they didn't spend enough time on him on this movie. Um, but it also, like, I don't know if I would have exactly gone with, uh, I don't know if I would have exactly gone with Joni either. Yeah, like, if anything, I don't know who I would have went with. Um, Maybe I would have gone on and maybe, yeah, who else would have went with in this film? Uh, Maybe you could have gone on and, oh no, got it. Yeah, maybe you could have gone on with the fortune teller. Maybe the fortune teller would have made sense. Um, to go on and be the werewolf in this movie. Like, hey, I told you about the whole Mark of the Beast. Um, that could have been interesting. But anyways, so Joni reveals herself and attacks Jimmy and says that it's showtime. Isn't that what normally people say? So Joni didn't ask to be a werewolf, but if anything, she didn't need to kill people anyways. So Joni reveals that her hand has the star mark on it, and so then she goes on and explains how that she became a werewolf because uh, she had sex with Jake, and there is no such thing, I guess, with unsafe sex with a werewolf. So I guess that's probably why Jake never goes on and never gets really close with the women that he's with, because he can't really have sex with them, because otherwise they'll turn into werewolves. So, but it also has weirdly uh has Joni start to talk about how all men are kind of animals anyways, and like, I'm like, really, we're going with that route? So Ellie and Joni start to fight here, and and uh, okay, so as there's a little bit of fighting going on, we have at some points where Jimmy is trying to get in the mix, and Jimmy gets tossed around. Uh, we have at some points where Joni used to be the villain of the story, so like there's this whole thing about them fighting fair, but then Joni's like, well, hey, I'm not gonna fight fair. Like, if anything, this is Hollywood. But also, she's the villain of the story anyway, so she's gonna do anything to win. Um, so as they continue to fight, and Ellie goes on and has this mace where she sprays into Joni's eyes. Joni goes on and gets this barrel of water, pours it over her body, and that's where Jake goes on and meets up with Joni. Jake is to just be just surprised that it's Joni being the one to have been this werewolf, and Joni ends up admitting like, well, yeah, like I had gone on and turned because we had sex together. So Jake even goes on to ask Joni to kill him here, and Joni's like, no, I know how this curse works. If I kill you, then if anything, I won't be a werewolf anymore. So that straight up tells us that killing Joni will be pointless anyways, but like also either like we would go on to have to assume that both Jimmy and Ellie killing Joni would stop them becoming werewolves, right? Or they would just be werewolves regardless. That would be the whole thing. But you would think that Joni and Ellie killing the person that turned them would kind of fix everything. But no, it doesn't even matter. That they have to go on and they have to find the key person who is actually to be Jake and kill him by the end of the film. And that's what is to go on and finally not make them werewolves anymore. Plus, also, there was like some Lost Boys sequels that came after the very first Lost Boy that had Corey Feldman in it. And that movie, the Lost Boys sequel, was to kind of be very much similar to this in so many ways. Maybe it was maybe a better written movie, but it's kind of loose. Um, but if anything, the way that they wrote that movie was that they basically had to go on and they had to kill vampires so that way they can come back to being normal themselves. And that was the whole thing from that, the Lost Boys sequel movie. So, if anything, yeah, there are times where they go on and they have those kind of ideas for these kind of horror films. Like, there's a lot of them that kind of share that same idea or ideal. So, Joni goes on and kicks Jake in the nuts, knowing that there's nothing that she could really do to kill him. Uh, and so but also Joni claims that she's going to go on and she's going to eat Ellie and choke on her blood and do all these evilish maniacal claims. So after she goes on and nut shots Jake. So as Joni transforms again, which is a horrible, the worst transformation ever I've ever seen in a werewolf film. And I've seen some horrible. I've seen some bad in my life. Um, what the heck happened here? What happened? Um, Something got lost in the mail here. Um, oh well. If there's any part of this movie of which that got a little lost, I'm having to do this in a very specific manner, and there might be a number of scenes that may have gotten cut out for whatever reason. So if this isn't perfect, then that's just the mistake of the way of which that this thing is, that it kind of is not working properly. So if for whatever reason like something just doesn't work well, then that's my mistake of just having a really bad thing to use this on. Um, oh, here, maybe it's gonna work. So as Joni turns into the werewolf and faces off against Ellie and Jimmy simultaneously, uh, the werewolf goes on and takes out Ellie and starts to smack her awake. And Jimmy goes on and gets a torch and starts attacking the werewolf. And as the werewolf goes on and kind of hits away Jimmy, Ellie wakes up and is like, "Oh, well, I guess you want to like play with your food before you eat it. You just want to play with us. You don't want to go on, and you don't want to like take us out right away." So Ellie was to have gone on and found the Wolfman staff, and what she does go on and do is she takes a piece of it, thrusts it into the werewolf's mouth, and the werewolf starts choking on it. And so the werewolf tries to get it out of its mouth, and it's burning its entire mouth. So while that's going on, all of a sudden, finally, the cops arrive, finally, after forever, and they start making their way into the area, and the werewolf starts to disappear. So Jimmy and Ellie put their hands up, and so they're talking to the cops now, and the cops are like, well, where's the animal at? And so it's like, well, yeah, it's up there somewhere. So Ellie realizes that the only way to get Joni to come down there to be attacked by these men is to basically call her out and to say that it's a werewolf and to go on and start to uh, call out that it's like, yeah, her name is Joni. She's this skinny, hyper, da da da. So, and she has a bony ass, and da da da. So she starts to insult her, and that has Joni burst from out of this window and give Ellie the finger. And that's when all the cops start blasting out their guns and start firing away at this girl who's a werewolf. So the werewolf falls, and so the cops start to surround the werewolf. And the werewolf, it seems, is continuing to kind of get up and kind of jerk up a little bit. So the cops keep blasting into the werewolf because obviously the cops don't have silver bullets. So they keep firing into the werewolf to the point to where Ellie and Jimmy have to confirm that this werewolf is actually dead. And so they realize that like the brain has kind of been blown off of this werewolf, so they have to assume that it's now dead because that has to make the most sense. So they have to rule off that she's dead. And so at some point, the cops come back in to mention how this animal is huge, that they're going to need so many people to carry it out. And then all of a sudden, they come to find that there's going to be a woman there instead of a werewolf. that basically full transformation back into the human form. So, because if anything, they call for animal control, but they find out that it's an actual human instead of a werewolf. So now we cut to Jimmy and Ellie making their way back to Bo, and Bo gets back up, or Bo gets up, and he goes on like, "Well, yeah, like that werewolf, he sucker punched me, but I'm okay." So now, so Ellie and Jimmy make their way back home, and so they're trying to confirm to one another if everything is all over. That they're curious of whether or not that they are still werewolves anymore. And so they make their way back into the house, and they're calling for their dog Zipper. And let me pause here. Maybe I shouldn't pause because I know that this will kind of cut off if I do anything. Um, so as they go throughout the house, I'm sorry, I apologize. I should have paused here. Um, so both Jimmy and Ellie start talking about how Jake is technically still a werewolf, and so as they're going on and they're trying to figure out how to get light in the house, Jimmy goes on and makes his way to the circuit breaker to hope that that's going to work for them. So Jimmy goes on and works the circuit breaker and turns the light back on, where of course Ellie says thank you. The two of them at this point are also going on and realizing that they're still werewolves. Jimmy goes on and is to grab, I think, what looks like a shovel or a metal piece. As he touches it, his fingers or his hands have veins popping out of it. And Ellie goes on to go through the kitchen and sees the pie cutter and is tempted to grab onto it, but when she does, she drops it because of the pain. So here's where Jake comes in the house, and both Ellie and Jake hug. Ellie goes on to mention to Jake how she thinks that something's wrong, and we have an inkling that at soon Ellie is going to turn. Jake is going on saying like, "Hey, it's okay, just breathe." Uh, Ellie is very confused, and so Jake is like, "Well, yeah, it's almost midnight. You're almost going to turn." So Jake is to say to Ellie that he came back for her, and so Jake says that this is the only way for them to be together. Uh, so Jake is telling Ellie that it took him years to figure this all out, and if anything, Jake realizes that this is a way for the two of them can live together happily ever after. La, 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 la. So here is where Jimmy is going on and lifting up his shirt, and his like rib cage is kind of weirdly like shifting in and out. So So Ellie doesn't want to become a werewolf, but if anything, uh, Jake continues on, and he goes on to say that, like, well, yeah, like, I'm gonna have to go on and I'm gonna have to kill your brother because if anything, um, there can only be one alpha. So Jake goes on and finds where Jimmy is. He's downstairs, and so Jake goes on and tells Jimmy that he'll make this all quick, and so Ellie goes on and comes to Jake with the pie cutter and starts to attack him. And so Ellie goes on and calls Jake a monster, and Jake is like, "Well, yeah, join the club because you're one too." So Jake drops Ellie as her hand is starting to come claws, and so Jake eventually is to at some point kind of mention about how all it had to come to is for him to be killed here. At some point, he mentions this. Um, how Joni going on and getting killed won't stop them from becoming werewolves, that it has to be him. So, so, Jimmy comes in with the shovel and starts attacking Jake as his hands of Jimmy start to turn into these claws also. And also his feet are to thrust out some claws from out of his shoes. So as Jake and Jimmy start to fight here, Jimmy all of a sudden turns into Spider Man weirdly, and Jimmy all of a sudden goes onto the wall and starts with his fingers and his toes to just start crawling on the walls because he has these sharp uh, hands and feet, so he can be able to just kind of crawl throughout the house. So as Jimmy finds a way to get out away from Jake, as Jake goes back to focusing on Ellie, here's where Jimmy goes on and gets back into the house, jumps on top of Jake, and as there's wrestling going on, Jimmy falls, or Jake falls to the ground. Ellie goes on and is to stab into Jake and then take the shovel and basically thrust the shovel into Jake's neck, making sure that they stab him into the heart with the silver, but also go on and take off his head to make sure he's dead. So, weirdly enough, we have yet another situation where Jimmy and Ellie are trying to leave the house because all of a sudden Jake's body is starting to burst into fire. We didn't have that happen with Joni's body, but weirdly we have it with Jake's body here. That the house is to all of a sudden in that room start to combust, but weirdly it doesn't completely destroy the house. It just destroys that one room. And then weirdly it just seems all just stuck into that one room that issue happens, and it doesn't burn up the whole house. To where it just seems that both Ellie and Jimmy can just be able to use the house again. It's strange. So So now they finally are to say that it's all over, and as both of the siblings hug, we'd all of a sudden come to find that Zipper comes back, and then all of a sudden Bo and Brooke come in, and Jimmy goes on to just kind of meet with his friends, goes on and kisses Brooke, and then walks off. And Ellie's like, "Well, yeah, I guess I'll just go on and I'll just stay here and I'll just clean the house because yeah, we're not going to go on, we're not going to become werewolves, right?" So it's so strange, this ending. So Ellie goes on and looks up at the moon, and that's the way the movie ends. Whoo! Yeah. With that said, um, I think it was at some point me just trying to figure out it's like there's a lot of points where it's like an easy flow of things, but there was also some times where I was trying to figure out exactly what happens by the end here. So that was my huge problem with like I know like where to go at certain points, but not every single second of it. So I was trying my best. Uh, but if anything, hopefully this is to go on. Well, 2 hours and 20 minutes. No one's gonna watch this one for that long. But at least this will be uploaded. That'll be fine. Uh, I think I can probably try and squeak in another review. I was kind of back and forth thinking about whether or not to go on and do another workout session today, but I think I'll probably go on and I'll skip it. Like I was going on and I was kind of being pretty active today on Timu, trying to obtain another piece of clothing that I can use for eventually a future thumbnail. Because eventually, from what I've been told, that there's going to be a God of War show coming, so that's going to be cool. A God of War movie show, don't know what it is, but either way, I'll at least have that to be tied with that show. I probably should have gone on and gotten something instead that'll be tied to. It was a Red Guardian hoodie, but I'm like, oh well. Um, I probably should have gotten that. I'll probably regret not getting it, but uh, oh well. Like at some point, I thought that the God of War sure was a better decision than the Red Guardian one was. Um, at some point, I hope to go on and kind of maybe scrape credits together enough to get that hoodie eventually. Uh, Maybe I'll go on and I'll trick Timu into getting me that. But anyways, uh, yeah. Uh, I feel great that I'm able to still continue to get all these thumbnail things. Uh, I'm happy that I'm going on and actually feeling that I can go on and be endlessly creative right now. And like I'm just trying to be as uh, optimistic as I can be, even though also, uh, like I don't know, like just I wish things were just kind of going better right now. I really wish things were going better right now, but oh well. Either way, I think it's about that time to say it's time to get out of here, so I can go on and do some other project or uh, probably go on and probably get a good turnaround and maybe try to squeak in another review instead of going on doing my workout today. Um, I'll save my workout for tomorrow so that way I can go on and kind of focus on a whole day of that instead of going on and trying to like do way too much in one day. That's kind of my biggest problem right now is I'm kind of doing way too much in one day, and then I'm just really extremely tired. Um, I'm just really like pushing myself way too much. Um, and then also, like a lot of people will probably see the evidence of that on my channel, where it's just like, yeah, we never really see you anyways. Um, but yeah, but that's probably why, because I try to decide to like just not do videos, because otherwise it'd be really just pushing myself way too much. But uh, I'm trying to do the best I can with all the things I have going on. Um, but anyways, I'm gonna get back out of here so I can hopefully get this to do something today. Um, but anyways, goodbye everybody. Bye everybody.